Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Mike's, proudly sponsored by our Patreon supporters and CoolStuffInc.com, where you can find cool stuff in stock every day. And check out our co-sponsor, CardHoarder.com, offering the best inventory prices and delivery of cards for Magic Online. And check out our altar sleeves. Support the show by using code MAGICMikes at checkout for 5% off anything in the store, including a set of exclusive sleeves featuring the Magic Mike's crew at altarsleeves.com/MagicMikes. And finally, our newest sponsor, Cardamajigs, has an upcoming Kickstarter for Cubamajigs Series 2. Cubamajigs are reusable booster packs for Magic Cube and more. Sign up for the Kickstarter launch notification at cubeks.com. That's CUBEKS.com. I am Evan Irwin, and we get started each week by saying hello to my two co-hosts, Aaron Campbell.
How's it going?
Ruben Bressler.
Hey, that intro is getting unwieldy.
We were just talking about that.
Yeah. But it's a good problem to have, and we're very fortunate to have such loving sponsors. But I mean, Evan needs his rest.
I get a good 70 seconds worth of nonstop at this point, and it's gotten longer over time. But those are good problems. For those who were hanging out last week, my voice is getting better slowly but surely.
I'm not going to be happy until we get a MeUndies sponsorship. That's going to be the I've arrived moment.
We have to hawk underwear. We have to.
Underwear's good.
People want to see it.
I could do with a chair sponsor. If any of those gaming companies with the gaming chairs want to get at me.
There we go. Put a little Magic Mike's logo on the back. Right?
That's right. And now that D20s are coming to Magic the Gathering, we could get a dice sponsor. So you could hit us up, any of you dice manufacturers out there.
I like it. Well, we also begin with our choice of the top comment from last week in a segment we call Honorable Mention, where Ruben will tell us who was the most eloquent in letting us know what card we did not choose as one of our top 10 Zoltan Boros cards. Ruben?
A lot of Zoltan Boros fans out there. A lot of traction in the comments section. And particularly, I wanted to say Julian Corvin, who has a Zoltan Boros Artist Tribal EDH deck.
Oh, wow.
What a wild thing to have. And linked it in the comments as well, with Bryon Stoutarm as the commander, i.e. a Boros deck. So it's hard for me to pick just one card to add to these lists. One of my favorites, however, that shows even more of this artist's versatility is Elixir of Immortality. The way the light shines through the window, the stringy residue on the outside of the bottle, and the petals of the flower inside all show such attention to detail and hint at a deeper story behind this artifact.
Yeah, for those who don't know, in Magic 2011, Elixir of Mortality showed up as an uncommon artifact. It's 1 generic mana, and it says 2 generic mana, tap : you gain 5 life, shovel Elixir of Immortality and your graveyard into their owner's library. As I recall, this was like a sideboard card for like control decks or something to just kind of make the game continue and finish, essentially.
Yeah, this was a sideboard card for those bore you to tears blue-white control mirrors.
Yep.
But then it became like the only win condition at one point in those decks as well, where it would just like loop Sphinx's revelations and their removal, and then would deck you because you ran out of stuff.
That was literally the win condition. Like, oh my god, and that was so painful to play against.
Yeah,
like,
it was.
And that's sort of like, that's why, like, what are these cards? The card doesn't look that powerful, or it's even certainly would see any tournament play, and this becomes a weird win condition.
Right. Well, that's why, I mean, Magic changed their development a little bit because of the blue-white Elixir of Immortality control decks, because they were like, the control finishers have to end games someday, right? That's why we got Pearl Lake Ancient the way we got it. That's why we got some of these big, giant, idiot control finishers in the manner that we did, and it's kind of thanks to Elixir of Immortality.
Well, we'll get to some of those here real shortly. Congratulations to Julian. Please contact us on social media for your prize. Thanks again to CoolStuffInc.com for sponsoring this giveaway. And stay tuned for our top 10 list this week, and maybe you can win next week's free gift certificate. As we're talking about our top 10 retro Battle for Zendikar and Oath of the Gatewatch cards. Right. I did not enjoy this block very much. I wanted to enjoy this block very much. I get wrapped in the hype. You know how I am. I was all about it.
I didn't come into this block saying I want this this block to fail. But once I realized that we weren't getting Indiana Jones World, I was like, I'm not about it.
Yeah, whenever I think of this block, I always think of the analogy that Morrow uses when he talks about what went wrong with this set, where he talks about going to an amusement park with his children, and that the reason why his kids enjoyed the amusement park, he thought he knew the reasons why they enjoyed it, and so he attempted to recreate that, and he was not close at all. And what he thought we wanted from Zendikar was, you know, we thought you wanted Eldrazi, and we thought you wanted this, and it was like, no, like we wanted, you know, we wanted all of these other facets, and, you know, I remember that retrospective of like, you know, we missed the mark.
With that said, the set, you know, it may not have been the biggest hit with fans, but it has an indelible legacy. I mean, a lot of the cards in this set are continuing to champion archetypes in the oldest formats to this day.
Yeah, I just feel like there was such a large gulf between the great cards and the stinkers. Like, most sets will have cards along the way at every benchmark where even if they're not, you know, tier 1 worthy, they're still seeing play elsewhere. I feel like with this, it's very stark. Like, you're either in a multi-format all-star or you're just bubkiss. Like, there's just very little room there.
Yeah, and, you know, the debut at PAX, the giant Ulamog that was
there.
That was
so
the cop
cool.
car.
I will say that statue thing was
the hype
amazing.
was real. The hype was 100%
there was a
real.
lot of hype. Yeah,
but it just didn't come through ultimately, and what you wanted it to be. You know, even with fetch lands, you're just like, wait, what does fetch lands do to standard? I do have
a lot of fond memories of playing this set in standard, but in general, I mean, I have a lot of fond memories of every set, so that doesn't mean anything, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed this standard. I was playing Esper Dragons at the time, but I do realize that, you know, it was a very expensive standard. And, you know, I happened to be able to afford it. I had the privilege to be able to buy. But we were also dealing with, you had Jace Finn's Prodigy in this standard, which was, you know, very expensive. You had the fetch lands. I mean, this was $1,000 decks were not uncommon in this standard. And so I enjoyed it, but I also realized in hindsight that there were probably a lot of people who were left out because you couldn't afford this. And that's not me being sassy and like, you can't afford this. It's like, no, you could not afford this.
This was the beginning sort of the era that standard decks could be very, very expensive.
Yep.
But let's go ahead and get started here with our number 10. Ruben, this is your first hire?
I do. I have 3 hires this week, and this is the first hire, which I'm not surprised this one's higher.
Well, and that's fine. We mentioned earlier about control finishers, and this is my number 10. This isn't like the greatest card ever. It didn't make a giant splash, but I loved it in that it was so unique. It's very odd, or at least it's very unique when Wizards is like, we're going to make this thing, and it's going to be the most clear-cut, serious, like, answer to a question. And you're like, what is the control answer in this block? What would you play if you're playing a control deck mirror to say, you know what, I have a threat and it's going to stick. I don't care what's happening, what you have in your hand. When you play Sphinx of the final word, it's the final word. You're gonna play the card. It's happening, okay? Sphinx is the final word. It's 2 blue, 5 generic mana. It's a mythic from Oath of the Gatewatch. It is a 5/5 Sphinx that can't be countered. It has flying and hexproof. And instant and sorcery spells you control can't be countered by spells or abilities. You're going to get to play your stuff. You're going to play your threat. You're not going to touch this card. Like, maybe you have a Wrath, but it doesn't matter. Unless you got that specific answer, this is going to happen, and that's what I love about it.
I don't recall this ever seeing play in Standard. I did, however, recall this seeing play in Modern. It saw a little bit of play in the sideboard of Ad Nauseam because you would want to board out your combo. And Ad Nauseam has always had these sort of weird, like, sometimes they'll have a Grave Titan in the sideboard where, you know, they're so ready for the combo, they're bringing in Duress and Thoughtseize, and then you're just like, whoop, Lotus Bloom, Grave Titan, and then they don't know what to do. Jermoka is another one, Dragonlord Jermoka. And so there's been all sorts of creatures who filled that role in Ad Nauseam. But yeah, this is a card that should have everything going for it. It's going for less than about $1 or $2 right now, but yeah, it has all the right words on it. I just don't remember it making much of an impact.
It did not make much of an impact. There was exactly 1 copy in the Seth Manfield top 4 of the Pro Tour where this set debuted. Not exactly a ringing endorsement for what could be a control finisher, but it just didn't. It was printed for a very specific reason, and then didn't need to be there. I mean, this was the era of like those Esper Planeswalker mix-up control decks. You still had Esper Dragons. There was not, I mean, this was a very specific answer, or a very specific tool that actually wasn't great in the format in which it was printed. This would have seen a lot more play in a lot of different sets.
Right. In a different world, yeah, this would be sort of, defining as a control finisher or whatever. And it's cool to me to look back and go, you know what? I loved what this card was doing. I recognize that it didn't really hit where it was going to go, or it wasn't, it wasn't the Pearl Lake Ancient or whatever of its time. But man, I enjoyed me a Sphinx.
It's a cool one.
All right. Let's move to number 10. Aaron, what you got?
So I love my number 10. I think it's a staple of any sort of aristocrat style deck and commander that you could be building. I'm a big fan of it. It's been an all-star in my She-Ray deck. My number 10 is Sifter of Skulls. So Sifter of Skulls is 3 colorless and a black. It's a creature type Eldrazi with 4 power and 3 toughness and devoid. This card has no color. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you get a 1/1 colorless Eldrazi Scion creature token, which has sacrificed this creature and add 1 colorless to your mana pool. So this is essentially copies 5, 6, 7, and 8 of Pawn of Ulamog. Obviously, Pawn is just better. It costs 3. You get O1s, and it's just typically better. But this is also fine as well for 1 more mana. You get a little bit more power, a little bit more toughness, and these Scions that you make can actually attack, whereas the previous Scions were O1s. And so they make mana very well, but that's really all they do. And so, yeah, if you're doing anything where you plan on killing your own creatures, this gives you a body left behind that you can either use to ramp, or you just have other bodies. And yeah, this is just a card I'm happy to see if I'm building any sort of EDH commander deck that, revolves around aristocrats. This is kind of an auto include at this point, and yeah, just happy to see it.
Yeah, this is, you always want as many of this effect really as you can get, depending on how expensive they are. But, you want as many Blood Artist triggers as you could possibly get when you're going aristocrats. And this one's a pretty good one because it's also big. It can handle its own. It can, pump in on a early planeswalker and survive a tangle with a 2/2 or something like that. So that's a pretty good card.
I mean, this is our first instance of Devoid, and I just cannot stand this mechanic. It's like the absence of a mechanic, like literally, right? It's the absence of color. Sure. It's trying to say this colored thing where you try so clearly to teach players, look in the top right, check out the mana cost. That's the color it's got. And this is like, nope, it doesn't have any. It's like, but it's the colored mana right there. No, it doesn't have any, because there's a few cards that care about colorless spells because that matters in ways that no one cares. I hate this mechanic. I understand why it exists, but man, I just did not enjoy it. Unfortunately. Let's move into number 9. Ruben, what's number 9?
Speaking of black Devoid cards, there aren't a ton of cards that have been in Pro Tour winning decks, and many fewer that have been in 2 different Pro Tour winning decks. This card doesn't really see much play anymore. Versions of this effect aren't really sought after in the older formats, but you can do a lot worse than Transgress the Mind.
Oh,
Transgress the Mind is a colorless and a black for a sorcery with Devoid. This card has no color. Target player reveals their hand. You choose a card from it with mana value 3 or greater and exile that card. This was an uncommon from Battle for Zendikar. This was very important for combating, any of the big finishers, anything that costs 3 even. 3 is not a ton. Not to mention, maybe the most terrifying Magic art. I think just
it's
bar none.
Scary.
It's very frightening.
Yeah, I seem to recall this even being main deckable at various points, just because, everyone was playing, again, you're playing these sort of soup decks where, you're running 3 mentors, you're running Gideon, you're running the dragons. I mean, this was very rarely a dead card.
And it's Devoid because reasons. Yeah. I want Devoid to matter in some fashion. It's just, there was nothing like, countering black spells or something at the time. It was just, it's, you want to play a colorless spell, maybe trigger something.
And I seem to recall them giving us variations of this card in future sets, and it just never really, I think they were like, oh yeah, 2 mana is the sweet spot for this, and then just it never saw play in Standard again.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen things like Agonizing Remorse. 2 mana discard seems to be a pretty good sweet spot, and occasionally they see Standard play. You get your Thought Erasures every once in a while. Transgress the Mind was really kind of the first one that started seeing high level tournament play.
Yeah, these days we have Palaka Predation, which is on the other side of a land that is 3 mana instead of 2 mana, but it's black. It's colored black. It's not Devoid, because that matters. Aaron, what's number 9?
So my number 9 is another card I'm really excited about. I love it I just cast it today, in fact. I was playing with my Pashalik Mons EDH deck. And speaking of cards that cost 3 or less or have the number 3 in them, a big fan of this card. Saw a little bit of play in Standard. It's a great budget option in EDH, and it's particularly good if you have to be playing a Goblin deck. My number 9 is Goblin Dark Dwellers. So Goblin Dark Dwellers is 3 colorless and 2 red. It's a creature type goblin with 4 power and 4 toughness and menace. The menace is relevant. I've had that come up in EDH. But I think the most important part of this is it says when Goblin Dark Dwellers enters the battlefield, you may cast an instant or sorcery card with CMC 3 or less from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. If that card to be put into your graveyard this turn, you exile it. So Brightstone Ritual, there's another ritual as well that's involved like red mana for every creature or goblin you have. Koldatha Rebirth, Infernal Plunge. There are all sorts of cheap, 3 mana things you can do in Commander, in Goblins no less. And so this is a great body for any sort of Goblin deck. It allows you to get those cheap rituals back, those cheap card draw spells back. I'm almost always happy to see this card and just nothing good. I mean, good for me, but I just love doing broken things with this.
I was expecting this to do a lot more, quite frankly, because I mean, free spells are always kind of scary. When they tone it down, like, I guess that's the magic, make that mana value very low. But also, eyeless goblins are terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want eyeless goblins anymore.
Well, when you live in a cave, like those fish that like lose all pigment and then can't see, it's like that. But for goblins, they just got their tremor sense. They just feel through their feet. That is terrifying. That is a terrifying
That is quite terrifying. So, as we continue on through the Devoid train, even though I don't care this has Devoid, it's ridiculous. But it's a cool card anyway, regardless of the fact that I don't like useless words. Sire of Stagnation is a black, blue, and 4 generic mana. And what it does is really cool because, like, it is there to stagnate. And you go, how would you stagnate a game? What would you say if you were the Sire of Stagnation? Well, this 6 mana 5/7 mythic from Battle for Zendikar, of course it's an Eldrazi with Devoid, it has no color. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, that player exiles the top 2 cards of their library and you draw 2 cards. And so, sure, play that land. Play it all you want. I get the goodies, though.
Another card I don't recall ever seeing much play in Standard, but it's going for about $5 in Commander, so somebody's clearly playing it.
We're getting there.
I was excited about this when I first saw it, just because I felt like it had the potential to be really annoying, and it just never really happened. But again, great art. I love the use of the frame here. I love the way that you can see bits of the Eldrazi through the frame, and I'm glad that it's seeing play somewhere, because it does do cool things.
Yeah, there's some pretty cool... Yeah, there's some cool interactions here. For example, Gyruda finding it off the top of your library would be pretty sweet. All sorts of fun stuff.
That's pretty nice. I like that. Yeah.
That's a fun one. But yeah, this is the idea that you have a Sire of Stagnation, and how would they stagnate the game? Well, whenever you play a land.
Yeah.
Give me the goodness. All right. Let's see. Moving here to number 8. Ruben, what's number 8?
My number 8 is a card that I don't recall casting in Standard ever, but I have cast, just a million times in Cube, in Brawl, in Commander. It is, it might be the best at what it does ever printed, because my number 8 is Hedren Archive. Hedren Archive was originally from Battle for Zendikar and has been reprinted in a number of Commander sets because it's that good. 4 generic mana for an artifact gets you tap, add 2 colorless, 2 wingdings, and it also has pay 2 generic and tap and sacrifice it to draw 2 cards. It's 2 Mind Stones stapled together. It doesn't feel that particularly special, but it's at an exact sweet spot that you want, and it's just so good.
Yeah, this card is surprisingly polarizing. I believe Tomer from MTG Goldfish really doesn't care for this card, or he didn't at one point, but this is a card I think that we've seen in a lot of Commander decks. I think Wizards really want this card to be a thing, kind of like they want certain other cards to be a thing. And this used to be a card I used to sort of jam into every deck, and I realized it's not for every deck, but the ones that want it really like it. I'm currently really high on this card for my Osgir deck because it is ramp, and then when you sack it, you can make 2 more from Osgir and then either get double the ramp or get double the card draw. So I'm a big fan of it for those reasons, and I love the art here. This is clearly Jace. You can see these sort of kind of corset or the cape and the insignia and things like that. So again, I think it's a fine card. I don't think every deck wants it, but the ones that do, it's not bad.
I mean, you can see a lot in Historic that Wizards used to give us lots of 2-mana mana rocks. And you had Guardian Idol and you had Signets. And there for a minute, you had Mind Stone. And Mind Stone, you still get to play in Historic, and it's a fantastic card. But then they said, well, what if we gave you 3 Mind Stones in Dreamstone Hedron? And this was in Rise of the Eldrazi. Well, we're going back to the Eldrazi world or whatever. So it's slightly smaller, but 2 Mind Stones is Hedron Archive. And both those cards are terrific. And it's a fantastic card that I've played tons and tons of.
And I think that's part of what they're struggling with in Commander right now is that, you know, for a while they're, like you said, 2 mana rocks were really where you wanted to be. And now we're seeing a little bit of pushback, or we're seeing a little bit more increased discussion about, let's not rule out the 3s, you know, and let's even dare to go to the 4s, you know? And so, you know, I'm glad, you know, because for a while there, it was feeling a little homogenous of, oh, we know what they're going to have. And, you know, like I said, it's not for everybody, and you probably don't want too many of these, but it's a fine card.
There you go. Aaron, what's number 8?
So I mentioned earlier, I don't leave home without my Sifter of Skulls whenever I'm playing in any sort of Aristocrats deck. And the same goes with my number 8, because I don't leave the house without Smothering Abomination. So Smothering Abomination is 2 colorless and 2 black. It is a Eldrazi with 4 power, 3 toughness, and devoid, Evan's favorite, and flying. At the beginning of your upkeep, you sacrifice a creature, and whenever you sacrifice a creature, you draw a card. This was a card that I remember Sam Black being really high on, because of course it is. He loves Aristocrat decks. I don't recall this seeing a lot of play in Standard, but this is basically an engine in and of itself. You have a format that's also full of a lot of scions that you're going to be sacrificing, so you don't have to work too hard to be able to draw cards. And just in case you don't have any sack outlets ready, it is a sack outlet, and it's also just a 4/3 with flying, which is fine. And so again, I have this in my She-Ray deck. This is just an all-star. You know, it's not hard to get this thing going, and I really enjoy kind of the mini game of keeping this thing going without, you know, failing and having to sacrifice itself. I love the art here of it just ripping apart another Eldrazi. Like, it's just, you know, you get to see the Eldrazi really kind of going after each other in a way that I don't think we had before, and I just love it.
Yeah, the idea, like, the upside on this card is through the roof, right? This is I slammed down this Smothering Abomination, I sacked a bunch of creatures, I drew a bunch of cards, I had a bunch of mana, blah, 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 blah. But when you don't have the board presence,
right,
you're staring down some threats.
Right, you want to be careful when you play this. You're probably not playing it on curve unless you've had some really great setup before. But you know, when you're in a position to really use this, I mean, I've drawn so many cards off this, like, it's stupid, and there are times you don't even realize you've triggered it. Like, you're just playing Magic, and you're like, draw a card. You're like, you know, and then
the scions. And
exactly. Yep. Always.
They always all trigger. I had no idea that you were such a big fan of 4 3s for 4 that were black but had no color identity. I'm expecting the rest of your list to only consist of 4 3s for 4 that have no...
The bar's up here.
That's right.
Well, you know, for my number 8, I didn't think about it long enough. I should have thought about it a little bit more. Because for a card that can't even, I can't believe I put it on an even number. Void Winnower is my number 8. I know, right? And this was just as we were going through it, I was like, oh my God, I put it in an even number. Void Winnower is a fantastic card. It is 9 generic mana for a mythic 11/9 Eldrazi. Everything is odd on this card, which I love. Your opponents can't cast spells with a converted mana cost or with even mana values these days. And your opponents can't block with creatures with even mana values, and this card is sweet. It's still almost $10. The freaking promos are like $42. Oh my God.
Yep.
There you go. This card is sweet.
Yeah, I seem to recall this seeing play in towards the tail end of the Standard. We had the green-red ramp decks that had Shrine of the Forsaken Gods, Jotty Offshoot. You were ramping into either a Tarka or Ulamog, but sometimes you would bring this in as well for the right decks. And yeah, it has seen new life in Commander. I faced this the other day, and it's so frustrating. And it's bad enough that you can't cast things, but the combat part is just sort of the salt in the wound of not only can I not cast anything, but then when you look at your board and you realize how poorly it lines up with this, and you're like, oh, I just can't block either. And it's an 11/9. Like, it's massive. It'd be one thing if it was on like a 2/3 where you're like, but then you're like, oh, Jesus, it can just kill you. And, you know, you have all of the memes and the puns of you can't even. You have the, you know, incredibly weird effect, you know, which is, you're just looking at this and it's just a nightmare.
I love this card.
It's a wonderful card.
This card is just perfectly executed. Even the collector's number is odd on this card. It's just spectacular.
Yeah, they did all the right things where I did not when I put it on an even number.
Yeah.
Let's move on here to number 7. Ruben, what's your number 7?
My number 7 is one of the most hated, one of the most talked about, like, design last-second mistakes when they stapled an extra toughness onto the Reflector Mage for the draft environment, and then, oops, we accidentally the entire format. For a colorless, a white, and a blue, you get a 2/3 human wizard originally from Oath of the Gatewatch. When Reflector Mage enters the battlefield, return target creature an opponent controls to its owner's hand. That creature's owner can't cast spells with the same name as that creature until your next turn. This card was everywhere. This card was in humans. This card was in Collected Company. This card was in toolbox decks. This card was in Bant decks. This card was everywhere. So ubiquitous, in fact, that it got banned. Can you imagine? Can you imagine a mana war? What have you done to your format when this gets banned?
Yeah, this is such a blemish. You know, when I think of this, I think of the blue-white flash deck, which was, you know, this was an important part of. And, you know, it'd be one thing if it was just the Man of War effect or the Mana War effect. But, you know, that second part of you can't cast this, like, that was backbreaking. And, you know, the 3-but, why? Why does it have a 3? It makes no sense. And, you know, now they play it in Modern, and you can copy with Phantasmal Image, and it's just awful.
And they're like, well, we were working on a limited environment and we put it to a 3. And this was, correct me if I'm wrong, they preemptively banned this because they said the blue-white deck was going to be the best deck after they got rid of Aetherworks or whatever it was at the time.
I think that is how that works.
And they're like, we know this is going to be too much. And we're like, okay, your Man of War broke it. Like, I guess.
This was the rampaging Ferocidon of that banned list announcement where it was like, this is going to be bad. And trust me, this would have been bad. Like, this definitely would have been. Like, there's very few feelings as bad as your opponent's bouncing your creature, but then you have another copy in your hand, and so you have to just stare at these cards.
Oof. So according to I'm actually looking at the ban restricted announcement. It looks like it did have the numbers to back it up. It said our data showed the white-blue flash deck was too powerful against the field, and Reflector Mage has been on players' list of most disliked cards since the days of Collected Company. Other cards were discussed to keep white-blue flash in check, but Reflector Mage came up time and time again as both frustrating and a targeted way to diminish the white-blue flash deck. So
agreed. Agreed on all counts.
Yeah, this is best intentions for a limited format. Just ruined a constructed format and did horrible things to old formats too.
Yeah. So with this, I think they were really dealing with the kind of the duo of, it was really just blue-white flash or delirium. Like, those were the two biggies. And, you know, you had either the Emrakul plan, which was frighteningly easy to enact, or you had the blue-white flash plan, which just felt like you couldn't really deal with. And so, yeah, it looks like they, you know, banned these just to improve diversity because it was really just those two and then everything else.
Well, that's what they get for making those cards better.
They also banned Git Probe and Grave Troll in that same announcement. So, pour one out. Yep.
Pour one out. F in the chat, y'all. Aaron, what's your number 7?
Another one of my favorite cards. If I'm ever playing 3 colors in Commander and one of them is black, I'm absolutely running this card. You can sometimes see it in Legacy or even Modern. I just love this card so much. My number 7 is Painful Truths. Painful Truths is 2 colorless and a black. It's a sorcery with Converge. You draw X cards and lose X life, where X is the number of colors spent to cast this spell. So 3 mana for 3 at 3 life. I'm in. Like, just simple, clean, effective. I love this card. Usually when I play this in Commander, there's always this little, like, ooh, like, people just forget this was a thing. And I love this. It's less than $1, so if you're into budget EDH, it's absolutely your jam. And just, again, at the core, 3 for 3. Yes. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, what? And so, if I have the mana to support this, I'm in. I love this.
Yeah, especially in Commander. Who cares if you're paying life in Commander? It's like, this is almost no drawback. 3 cards for 1 in black is huge. This was why Dark Jeskai was dark. This was basically the only black card in the deck.
Absolutely.
And if you've ever have you ever gotten to draw 4 cards off of a Painful Truths?
I was about to say.
Oh, the Thalia rule?
The Thalia?
Yeah.
It's some good stuff. There's some good stuff that you can do with Painful Truths. Converge, another ability that was very underwhelming. This was like the only card with Converge. There were like 3 cards with Converge that saw tournament play. Most of the ones that were like super hyped, or there was like a 2/2 for 4 with Converge that would have been a 6/6.
Woodland
and everyone
Bellower.
was like, yeah. And then,
No,
and then
was that what it was?
There was
No.
a 3 colorless and a green 2/2 with like vigilance and trample
I can't
and
think
converge.
of the name of it.
Woodland Wanderer.
That's
There we go. Thank you.
And everyone
It's
was like,
still
"Ooh, this thing's huge!" And then it just never did anything. Like that was kind of all of the converge cards.
Well, now you have prismatic ending, and that's seeing play in every format.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's some of the best removal ever made.
Yeah.
As
Oh
they
my
are wont to
God.
do these days. But Painful Truth, being able to for convergence to kind of grow with taxing effects, I think is amazing. Like drawing 5 of a
hilarious.
Painful Truth has to be on a bucket list for somebody out there because that is fantastic.
Yeah.
Let's see here. For my number 7, this was a card that I thought was kind of neat looking. I mean, it was certainly cool. I was like, wow, that's a mythic. But then I saw someone actually resolve it, and I was like, ho, ho, ho. I had underestimated Oblivion Sewer. That card is dope. 6 generic mana for a 5/8 mythic Eldrazi. When you cast it, target opponent exiles the top 4 cards of their library. You may put any number of land cards that player owns from exile onto the battlefield under your control. Yes, it still hits weird stuff these days, like if you were exiling cards with Karn or whatever. But back in the day, just like 6 mana, ramp me like 3 lands was huge. Like that was gigantic.
And it's worse just a 5/8 for 6. Like, sure.
It's a lot. That's a lot of numbers. That's a big numbers. Yeah.
When you're not allowed to run Primeval Titan and you're not allowed to run Sylvan Primordial, there are only so many big top-end idiot things that you can put in your landfall deck. So if you're going to play Steve on turn 2 and then play your Hedron Archive on turn 3, this is kind of, this is what you want to be ramping into. Something, decently sized, gets you another land, does some other cool stuff. And oh, by the way, every once in a while, this will just get you 10 because you've, exiled 20 of their cards, and it's just absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah, this card was sweet. And again, this was one of those I was like, whoa, oh, that's a 5/8. Oh, that's a 5/8. Oh, God. What kills a 5/8?
Not
nothing.
much.
All right, let's move on here to number 6. Ruben, what you got?
My number 6 is a card. Like, we're talking about a bunch of just terrifying elder monsters. Obviously, the people of Zendikar were under siege. It was very difficult times for these folks. It's like when the crystalline entity attacked that outpost in Star Trek.
No, you did
It's
not.
bad. It's just, they stand no chance. But, the resistance is trying. And one of the big pieces of the resistance that was trying is the Zulapor Cutthroat, because this card did see a lot of play over its time in Standard. Zulapor Cutthroat is a colorless and a black for a 1/1 human rogue ally from Battle for Zendikar. Whenever Zulapor Cutthroat or another creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life, and you gain 1 life. This card was very important in the Golgari Aristocrats decks, the 4-color Cryptolith Right decks, the Rally decks. If you were trying to ticky-tack your way to a win, you needed Zulapor Cutthroat.
Yeah, so this was another take on Blood Artist. Blood Artist was kind of the OG of this, and so Blood Artist was itself or another creature. It wasn't limited to creatures you controlled, and then it was just a target player. And then with Zulapor Cutthroat, you got 1 more power. It was limited to creatures you control, but it would hit each opponent. So, there was kind of a black-green Aristocrats deck in Standard at the time, if I remember correctly. And it has seen new life in Commander as well. This is your second copy of Blood Artist if you're doing any sort of Aristocrat things, and 3 relevant creature types of human rogue ally. This is bound to see play, and it does.
I mean, one of the things that we wanted when we went back to Zendikar was Indiana Jones World. And the other part of that was allies. And everyone liked building ally decks. And let's make more allies and ally triggers and ally stuff. And they made ally cards with no allies or
it was
reference
Rally,
allies.
and it was terrible.
Yeah, and it was now for the Rally. And then we went back to Zendikar again. And they did the whole party thing, not allies. And it's like, we like allies.
I like party better than allies because allies is a little bit parasitic. And it's just another creature type. But of the allies, by the way, this is the one that is the most popular. I know that there is a popular build in Commander of General Tazri, which is a 5-color color identity commander, and the only ally in the deck that General Tazri goes and gets is Zulapor Cutthroat, which I think is hilarious.
Yeah.
Is what it is, I guess. Aaron, what's number 6?
My number 6 is a card that, I recall being a bit of a nothing. It didn't really do anything in Standard. We didn't hear about it for years. And then all of a sudden we started hearing whispers that it was going to be a Pioneer All-Star. And I remember specifically one of our patrons or one of our listeners at the time was like, I'm hearing rumors of a buyout. I think there was a Pro Tour, a Pioneer Pro Tour, or a major Pioneer event happening. And this card was being bought out. And we were just like, what? And then before you know it, it was a tier 1 deck in Pioneer, and it stayed that way until it was banned in an attempt to diversify the metagame. It's still banned as of this day, which just boggles my mind to think about it. My number 6 is Inverter of Truth. So Inverter of Truth is 2 colorless and 2 black. It's a creature type Eldrazi with 6 power and 6 toughness and devoid. Evan's favorite, and flying. When Inverter of Truth enters the battlefield, you exile all cards from your library face down, and then you shuffle all cards from your graveyard into your library. Now, you may be asking yourself, what changed? What made this card very good? It was Thassa's Oracle. And so you basically played this sort of blue-black control deck where you would play cards like Dig Through Time, you would play your Treasure Cruise, you would play Tassiger, and then when the time is right, you would have Inverter of Truth, and then you would do the thing. Ideally, you would have very few cards left in your library. You slam Thassa's Oracle, and you win the game. And this was a very, very powerful deck all the way until the end. People even tried making it a thing in Modern when Ad Nauseam was, when Simian Spirit Guy was banned. You saw Ad Nauseam players kind of move to a weird Inverter deck to try to do the same thing with very limited results. But yeah, I would have never dreamed that this card was going to end up being so good to be banned in a format. And sometimes there were just games, because I did try this deck, sometimes there are games where a 6/6 with flying does get you there, where, you'll get your library down to like 5 cards, and you're like, all right, let's do this. And, it is just a 6/6 body. And so sometimes it gets you there. My favorite thing I love about this strategy is people who didn't know how to fight it. And so you would get people that would bring in graveyard hate. Not realizing that helps you, because if there's nothing in your graveyard, that's what you want. And so it was hilarious for those first couple weeks of people that are like, I know what I'm going to bring in. I'm going to bring in Torment Scripts. And it's just like, like, hello, like the people who bring in Cage, the people who bring in Cage Against Living End, where you're just like, who's going to tell them? Right.
This was my number 10.
Nice.
It's tough to overstate this is a metagame scalpel is what or not a scalpel. This is a metagame, like very specific. Like it was very good for this short period of time in this one format and nowhere else.
But it was so good they banned it.
It was so good they banned it and has seen no play anywhere else of note. And also, hey, a 4th black devoid 4-drop for Aaron. This is a full third of the list.
It's funny though, because the thing that stopped this from being a player in Modern was we didn't have the blue delve spells. We didn't have Dig Through Time. We didn't have Treasure Cruise, which again, you really needed to, keep your graveyard empty. And so I've seen some versions of this that have tried running main deck relics and tried running Tassiger, and it's just not the same. Like you really did need those cards to make this work.
And this is, like that ability is just so weird and narrow. It's either going to break something or it's going to be complete garbage. And we're currently in the garbage moment.
It's Leveler, except like a mana cheaper, I guess. And Leveler never saw any play either. So,
but I love that about Magic. Like of the many things I love about Magic, I love that all it takes for a bad card to be good is either another card being printed or, some enterprising player to like go through their bulk box and like put the stars together. And I love that. I love stories like this of like that card, and just that's amazing to me.
Yeah, these days, $1.30 or whatever a pop. This thing got up to like $30-$40 a copy because you had to run a playset if you're playing the Inverter deck. Yeah. And a lot of people are like, now Pioneer sucks because there's no Inverter, because like there's no target or whatever to aim at. But like at the same time, did you enjoy losing to this deck? Like what? It seems pretty miserable.
And now Pioneer's like off the table, it sounds like.
And nobody likes Pioneer these days, so whatever.
Yeah.
Either way, my number 6 is a terrific, awesome creature. I get excited when I see low mana value creatures at high rarities, because I know that Wizards has pushed it that extra mile. I love cool, small pushed creatures, and I didn't necessarily see this one coming, but I knew the first time I saw it on deck list, and certainly I knew the first time someone went turn 2 this, turn 3, almost anything, like a ham sandwich, and you were like, did that Eldrazi Mimic just become a ham sandwich?
Oh,
because it totally did, and it was totally awesome the rest of the game. Eldrazi Mimic is a 2 generic mana rare from Oath of the Gatewatch. It's a rare Eldrazi as a 2/1, and whenever another colorless creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may change Eldrazi Mimic's base power and toughness to that creature's power and toughness until end of turn. Yes, this is a card that is good because of Devoid. Shut up. I still like the card, still think the mechanic's terrible, but I do love me an Eldrazi Mimic. So
yeah, so this was a terrifying start for all of the Eldrazi decks, because when Eye of Ugin was legal, it was free. So you would just start Eye of Ugin turn 1, Mimic, sometimes even 2 Mimics, and that was your turn 1. And you were just like, oh. And then like next turn, you would play your Temple, turn 2 Thought Knot, and then that's 12 power on turn 2. 8 is doming you. Like, this card was terrifying. And yeah, this card just gets out of control very, very quickly, and just, yeah.
Also extremely good with Vile Aggregator, which was in those Eldrazi Devoid decks. I mean, this was the ideal turn 1 play when you had Eldrazi Temple or Eye of Ugin, because anything that came after it, even if it was just an endless one, you know, attack you for 3 or whatever. This thing is great.
Yeah, this card obviously saw plenty of play with Eternal Scourge. Which was a card that got to play, obviously, Matter Reshaper, Reality Smasher.
Yeah, and all the hits, right? Reality Smasher, Thought Knot Seer, you know, any of the cards with Devoid that were popular. There was the Sky Spawner and, you know, a bunch of the other stuff like that. And this was just the perfect thing to lead into those.
Yeah, and that's what it needed to be, and I really enjoyed it for what it was. Let's move on here to number 5. Let's see. Ruben's, yours is higher on someone else's list.
This is a higher, yeah.
Aaron, what's number 5?
My number 5 is a classic case of looking at the art for something and not knowing anything about the character or what's featured within, but just wanting to know everything about it. Like, knowing there's a story there, knowing that something's not quite right, and just seeing this sort of dynamic event happening, or this dynamic person happening. And also the card just happened to be good too. My number 5 is Kalitas, Trader of Gets. So Kalitas is 2 colorless and 2 black. He's a vampire warrior with 3 power, 4 toughness, and lifelink. If a non-token creature an opponent controls would die, you exile that card, and you put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield. You can also pay 2 colorless and a black and sacrifice another vampire or zombie and put 2 +1/+1 counters on Kalitas. So Kalitas was the, I believe, the head of one of the families, one of the vampire families. You had, what's the old girl? Drana, and then you had Kalitas. And Kalitas's side of the family had sort of pledged allegiance to the Eldrazi and allowed themselves to sort of be hosts for them. And that's what you see on his head. You see the Eldrazi skull cap, or the Eldrazi that has sort of attached itself to him. You also see these kind of spines that are coming out of him to imply that he's been warped by the Eldrazi influence. And this card is just an engine. This is a card that screams Jund. This is a card that you need to deal with by itself. And in fact, Jund has run this in Modern at various points. If not in the main deck, then as a sideboard card. And this card can really just kind of run away with games. It's graveyard hate. It's great against the burn decks or the prowess decks. And it's just a big body as well. And going for about $15 right now. So still continues to see competitive play, was a powerhouse in Standard, and, you know, sees play in EDH as well. And just, you know, a terrifying and good card at the same time.
Yeah, one of the most expensive cards in the block, basically, in that it's still super good to this day in terms of what it does and how efficient it is.
Yeah,
it says something when you're a 4-drop and you see play in Modern. Yeah. Particularly in Jund, which is like the valuest of value decks. Only the best of the best, for the pound for pound fighters, the best 1-drops, the best 2-drops, the best 3-drops, and very rarely the best 4-drops. I mean, it's like this and Bloodbraid Elf, and that's kind of it. Because this was such a good, it was everything you needed. It was incidental graveyard hate. It had 4 toughness to deal with Bolt. It had lifelink to be able to race stuff. It was a mana sink in case you needed that for later. It was everything you wanted it to be, and it didn't die to abrupt decay. So this was, I mean, it just filled so many niches in one little Magic card, and it's very good.
Yeah.
Well, for my number 5, I don't know if it filled a niche. It kind of filled every deck with forests for about a year or two. This was a card that, like, as soon as I saw it, it's just one of those things that you know and you understand that there are certain cards Wizards makes in a Standard environment that on rate you're just going to see them forever. Like once you see a Bone Crusher Giant or whatever, like that rate is so good. It's better than any other rate that I can have on any other creature. And so the moment I saw Sylvan Advocate, I'm like, oh my God, this card is going to be everywhere. It requires such a low sort of floor, such a high ceiling in terms of impact. Sylvan Advocate is a rare originally from Oath of the Gatewatch. It's a green and generic mana for a 2/3 elf druid ally. There's those allies again. It has vigilance, and as long as you control 6 or more lands, Sylvan Advocate and land creatures you control get +2/+2. I know it's incidental, but sometimes you're animating lands. There are man lands in Zendikar block.
Absolutely.
And this thing just got awesome the whole time.
Yeah,
your shambling vents can go up to 4/5. That's awesome.
Yeah, this is basically a grow your own Tarmogoyf. You know, this win in every deck, whether you're playing a mid-range deck. This also saw play in that Greed Rend ramp deck that I mentioned. Yeah. Because even if you can't necessarily ramp into your Atarkas or your Ulamogs, you still just get in there with a bunch of 4/5s that are 4/5s way sooner than they need to be. As we've said many times on the show, you know, there are some cards that, to me, one of the indicators of a good card is you don't even have to try to break it. Where, yeah, you can certainly ramp early. You can also just play Magic and just say, here's a turn 3 on turn 2, which is fine. And then you just play. And then before you know it, this thing is now a 4/5, or you just happen to get to the late game and it's 7 or 8 and you draw a 4/5 off the top. Like, it's fine. And fantastic card.
It's good early, it's good late. It pumps, like 2 of them pumps lands +4/+4. Like that's just
that too. I mean, just being it is a Tarmogoyf. That's exactly what this is. We weren't getting 2/3s for 3 for a colorless and a green for. I think this was like the first of those, and it was one of the first ones that we and now we're we get them so often that we don't even play Destiny Spinner. But this, I mean, it held off the aggro decks. It became a threat on its own late. It had incidental chip damage associated with it. This card was spectacular.
Yeah, this is one of those cards where it's like, it's clear this is one of the chase rares. They want you to look for 4 of these, play 4 of these. It's good in all the green decks, and sure enough, it certainly was. All right, let's move on here to number 4. Let's see. Ruben, what's number 4?
It is wild to me that this card was banned in a format at one point. But it was. It is a very good card. It did win a Pro Tour in Steve Rubin's Celestia aggro deck. And I mean, it's good, but did you really think that Oath of Nissa would have been banned in Pioneer at one point? Oath of Nissa is a green mana for a legendary enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature, land, or planeswalker from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast planeswalker spells. This card, of course, became banned because it was another green pip in those Leyline of Abundance Nykthos decks that had powering out Nissa Who Shakes the World and things like that. But it was also just it was the green ponder. It was allowing you to fix your mana. You could find your fortified village or whatever you needed. And oh, by the way, you could also find a Nissa or a Gideon or an Avacyn or whatever off the top of your library.
Yeah, I seem to recall this being banned like very, very early in the format. Like I seem to recall it was like, Pioneer's a thing. Oh, just don't get any ideas. We're going to go ahead and ban this. And it was like, what? Like,
yeah.
They eventually came to their senses, but again, this, when you think of like a green ponder, right? It's fine if you draw multiples, like, oh no, I got to sack one. Well, now there's another card type in my graveyard, which sometimes matters and sometimes you care about. But I agree. This was one of those, like, are you serious? They just banned that? That's the banning card? Okay.
Yeah.
It
was a very strange choice, that's for sure.
Well, I tell you what, of all the cards in the entire block, all of those cards, our number 4, Aaron and I's number 4. Aaron and I's number 4. Look, this card is
Aaron and my number.
There 4. We go. Thank you. Well, look, I'm a Southern man. All I know is this is one of those cards again that I read it and I kind of read it. And then I read it again, and I'm like, this card is going to be nothing but problems. Aaron, what's our number 4?
So just to kind of build off of that, this is another card that I seem to recall doing not very much in Standard, it being very expensive at the time. And another card that kind of, years went by and we really didn't hear anything from. I seem to recall it being kind of a tier 2 deck in Modern. It had a really small group of devotees that really loved it and just kind of ran with it. But only in the last, 6 months to a year did this really become a tier 1 deck now in Modern. It's also very, very good in Pioneer. Our number 4 is Bring to Light. So Bring to Light is 3 colorless, a green and a blue. It's a sorcery with Converge. Search your library for a creature, instant, or sorcery card with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of colors of mana spent to cast Bring to Light. You exile that card and then shuffle your library, and you can cast that card without paying its mana cost. Now, in my opinion, there's a couple of cards that have really enabled this strategy. The first one is Wrenn and 6, which basically allows you the ability to keep bringing back your fetch lands and just kind of give you perfect mana, where you're able to fetch exactly what you need. The Triomes were other cards that really enabled this strategy. And then you had Dryad of the Elysian Grove, which made mana just kind of not matter anymore. So you now have these sort of 4 or 5 color soup decks in Modern that are largely, based around this card and the strategies that enable it. And, there's also another variant that plays around with Mizzet Reborn, Omnath, Locus of Creation. It really is just sort of standards design mistakes. Like when you really look at this deck, it just has all the hits, like Baby Teferi, Omnath, you look at this and you're just like, it's just mistakes. But regardless, these are both, tier 1 decks in Modern. This is tier 1 deck in Pioneer. And again, it just took a couple of years to get here, and it just took the printing of, 1, 2, or 3 other cards to make this, unknown card that no one cared about a really major player in a format.
Yeah. This was also a popular Scape Shift deck for a little while.
That's what they do with it now.
Yeah, which, is basically a blue-green deck that kills you with mountains. Like, it has no actual mountains in the deck. It has no red spells in the deck. It just has incidental, stomping grounds and things. Yeah, Bring to Light, when you get to search your library for anything and put it into play, it doesn't really matter if it's, super narrow and hard to do, but at least another Converge card is seeing some Magic the Gathering competitive play.
You got the creature or the instant or a sorcery. This is also one of the cards that sort of has a long tail. If there's any awesome creature or sorcery or instant, made that's 5 or less mana, well, I can go find it with Bring to Light, and that's going to be a question from here on out.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on here to number 3. Ruben, this is your final hire.
This is my last hire.
And Aaron, this is your only hire.
Yep, exactly.
Which means this is my row to hoe here for my number 3.
You've done enough.
Tell you what.
5 kids.
Hey-yo. Well, look, an abomination of Irwin's, ladies and gentlemen.
That was the best tweet. I'm
telling you, he just rattled it off. I didn't prompt him. I didn't say anything. He was just like, an abomination, Dad. An abomination.
Amazing.
Well, this is one of those cards that has it has aged incredibly well. This is an aged like wine. This was one of those cards that definitely flew under the radar. This is one of those cards that I like having the retro top 10s because I can go back and I can appreciate cards like this. This is easily a card that back in the day when I saw it, I might have given it a once over. This is never going to happen. This is casual BS. Who cares? But no. When you look back and you take a look and you see just what heavy lifting Zendikar Resurgent does.
Yeah.
Zendikar Resurgent is a hell of a Magic card. It is a rare from Oath of the Gatewatch. It's 2 green, 5 generic mana, so 7 mana for a rare enchantment. Whenever you tap a land for mana, you add 1 mana of any type that land produced, and whenever you cast a creature spell, you draw a card. So it's it's the mana flare, and it's all the cards that draw cards when you cast creatures. It's the peanut butter and the chocolate all together, and I love it, and this card's fantastic.
I seem to recall this being a budget card at one point. I think I had this either in my Omnath deck or my Hapatra deck, but yeah, this used to be a card that didn't cost very much. It goes for about $5 to $7 now, depending on the version. And yeah, this is another one of those cards that didn't see a lot of, competitive play, but Commander, this screams Commander. 7 mana, not hard to get to, particularly in green. You said, a mana flare effect that's only for you. It doesn't affect anybody else. If you're playing green, you're probably playing a lot of creature spells, and so you have a cantrip ability on it. This has all the earmarks of being great in Commander, which it is.
Yeah. And of all of the cards in the Return to Zendikar block, Zendikar Resurgent really does carry the banner for being a Zendikar-centric kind of card. I mean, it's big, it's clunky, it's not great in standard. It never saw any play in standard. It's a 7-mana enchantment that didn't do anything when it came into play.
Exactly.
But it's great for the casual players. It told a story of, what the land means to the people, of being able to double the mana and getting extra power out of your allies and things like that. I mean, this card's spectacular.
Like, well, what's more commander than a 7-mana enchantment that doesn't do a damn thing when you play it? But later, when you untap, it's awesome. That's fantastic. All right. Let's move on here to number 2. Ruben, what's number 2?
All right. This card is stupid. I get the story reasons why we have to have the big 3, like, do crazy stuff. But was there any particular reason why we printed Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger the way that we printed it? Because it definitely ruined a lot of tournaments and ruined a lot of formats and continues to wreak havoc on Historic to this
ruins
day.
cubes too.
Legacy as well.
Yeah. Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger is 10 generic mana for a 10/10 legendary creature Eldrazi. Fine. Cool. I'm on board. I'm ready. When you cast this spell, exile 2 target permanents. Okay, I get it. I get that you want it to be a cast trigger, but this is excessive. Indestructible. Ulamog's the indestructible one? Cool. Okay. Whenever Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger attacks, defending player exiles the top 20 cards of their library. What? I just don't get it. I don't understand how we went through design and development and was like, yes, this card is okay at the numbers that it has. We don't need, also, we're going to print, Marvel, Aetherworks Marvel, and we're going to get all of those cast triggers off of Aetherworks Marvel and just ruin that. And oh, by the way, Tron has existed for millennia at this point, so of course we're going to play this in Tron. It's just wild to me that this card got printed the way that it did.
Yeah, this was my number 3. I mean, the Eldrazi had really big shoes to fill. They had to compete with, previous versions that were considered iconic, and had left, an indelible mark on various formats in our hearts. And, this was one of them, and next to Emrakul, that really lived up to that. And, yeah, you're right. Seas play all the way up to Legacy now. The 12 post is back. And so this is something you can post into. This gives Tron something as well. I don't think this is one of those, I think, that has actually eclipsed the previous version of, I don't even really see the original Ulamog anymore. We still talk about Emrakul the Aeon Storm because we always will. And so while the new Emrakul lived up to the previous one, this is the one that really eclipsed the other one in a way that I don't think anybody saw coming. And, you're right. Being able to exile 2 target permanents is devastating. And that's a cast trigger. This doesn't have to resolve. Like, nice counterspell, idiot. And then, you have Indestructible, you have the 10/10. Even if you can't block it necessarily, you still just die in an incredibly strange way. And I remember them talking about how, Annihilator is not very fun. Well, how about just watching you get milled? Because that's more fun. And, I was there for the Battle for Zendikar event at PAX where you had the Ulamog coming through the window. And, this is just incredibly good. And you mentioned kind of the weird timing where, I don't think they meant for this and Marvel to exist in the same format together, where I think the worst thing they had, kind of in mind was Atarka. And, being able to get this for free was just nobody's idea of a good time.
Letting Marvel, cast the card was a gigantic mistake.
Yep.
And this thing doesn't even mill. It exiles all of your cards. You can't, get them with a Gaia's Blessing or whatever. Nope. You're like, nope, I'm just out forever. This is a good example for those who can look up, if they even exist. You can find the cube list for June 2021 on MTG Arena where this card existed in it and ruined it because there was nothing good to stop it. It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Oof. Yeah. That card was a lot. All right, let's move on here to Aaron's number 2. What you got?
So this is a card I really tried to avoid putting on my list because we had talked about it quite a bit, but I just kept coming back to this one, and I kept coming back to my number 1, and particularly this one. One of the things that I've said many times before is that this card really helped change the way that we look at Eldrazi, because I wasn't around for the original Zendikar, but it was my understanding that the Eldrazi were really known for being sort of titans, and, we didn't really have many great examples of an aggressive Eldrazi deck, and, this card really helped define Eldrazi as we know it now. Eldrazi aggro of, not only being an aggressive deck, but also having the ability to be disruptive, and also having sort of a built-in insurance policy that made it very, very difficult to kill. And so, Eldrazi continues to be a great budget option in Legacy and Vintage. So this card does see play in Modern, Legacy, and Vintage currently, and it's no surprise why. My number 2 is just Reality Smasher. So Reality Smasher is 4 colorless and a wingding for a 5 power, 5 toughness, just trample and haste. Why? And then whenever it becomes the target of a spell an opponent controls, you counter that spell unless that person discards a card. So again, we mentioned your turn 1 Eye of Ugin, your turn 2 Eldrazi Temple, and then turn 3 was usually just Reality Smasher. It's not unusual for this to come out quickly in older formats as well. And this card is just terrifying. This was the card that you never wanted to see after your Eldrazi Mimics because they're 5/5s too. And this card just can close out games very, very quickly. I love the sort of riddle of where is the head on this thing, because it's not where you think it is. And if you really want to look at the zoomed out, high def art of this, it's wild to look at. It has all of the earmarks of Kozilek and the sort of bismuth, the prisms and everything. But yeah, this card is terrifying and gave Eldrazi a really quick way to close out games that also was difficult to interact with.
Yeah. This was my number 5.
Nice.
This card is absurd. I mean, 5/5 for 5. Like, we're already good. Like, we're already at a place where we might play 5/5 for 5. Haste. Like, now we're at Charging Monstrosity, which was like the best uncommon in Ixalan. Trample, right? And built-in protection on itself? Are you kidding me? This and tough protection, too. Like, you have to discard a card. You have to pay 2 cards no matter what you do. Even if you have a dismember, much less if you're trying to bolt this thing to death, you're gonna have to get rid of your entire hand. This thing's absurd. I mean, and I look at this, and then I look at some of the cards that they powered down because they were worried about them, and then they left Reality Smasher because that was fine.
You remember they were like, Reality Smasher, we had it at 3 generic mana and 2 wingdings, but we felt that was too restrictive. That would never see any play if we made you use 2 colorless mana to play it.
Making colorless mana is very easy.
Very, very easy. This is the first card to ever have Ward of discard a card on it.
Effectively, yeah.
And it's very scary. And it was a hell of a force to be reckoned with. We didn't get 5 mana 5/5 trampler hasters back then. Just period. Let alone one that was easy to cast and one that started showing up in all the formats because of how huge it was and how hard it was to stop.
Yeah.
Card was fantastic. So for my number 2, this is one of those cards that I picked because I felt like no one else is going to pick it, and it doesn't feel like anybody did, and that's okay. This is a card that's weird. It's super weird. I love that it's weird. It's also one of those cards that's going to be incredibly difficult to reprint. It's not stupidly expensive like Ulamog is, and that's okay, but it is a Titan like Ulamog is because it is the Great Distortion. It is Kozilek, the Great Distortion. The sort of, the big marquee card from Oath of the Gatewatch was, look how weird our Mythic Rare guy is. Well, the Oath of the Gatewatch Mythic Rare of Kozilek, the Great Distortion is 8 generic mana and 2 colorless mana. So 2 wingdings and 8 generic mana. So 10 mana for a 12/12 legendary Eldrazi. When you cast it, if you have fewer than 7 cards in hand, you draw cards equal to the difference. It has menace for whatever reason, and discard a card with mana value X, counter target spell with mana value X. That is awesome.
Yeah, so this one, tends to be the most underwhelming of the reboots of the Eldrazi. We talked about Ulamog and how it eventually eclipsed the original Ulamog. We talked about Emrakul and how the new one very much lived up to the old one, but didn't really eclipse it. We will always go back to Eon's Torn. This one, to me, kind of landed with the whimper. Kozilek itself, I don't recall seeing a lot of play to begin with, and the new version doesn't seem to really have changed that. I actually faced somebody the other day that had this as their commander and it was fine, but yeah, this was another card that I think I remember we were coming off the high of the new Ulamog and we were like, okay, we're ready for more. What's next? You're hungry for dinner, you plow through the appetizer, you're ready for the main course. And then I remember this coming out and people going like, what else you got? It was just clear that this was not Ulamog at all. And I don't recall this seeing a lot of standard play. I don't see it too much I don't think I've ever seen it in older formats, and I don't see this very much in Commander, and it's just fine. But it just didn't have the same impact that the other two did.
Ashlyn Rose plays this in game nights in Commander every once in a while, and it's a fan favorite, but you're right, it does not see a ton of Commander play. What I do remember about Kozilek is I think that this was the first Magic card that I saw that had the Wingding in its upper right-hand corner. I think that this is the first one.
Remember the Judge? There was some kind of weird Judge leak around this time, and there were some other cards I think involved. But yeah, this one was out there, which was weird. And Disrupting Shoal as a a triggered ability or an activated ability is really neat.
It's cool.
I like that. I think it's cool and unique, and that's why I have my number 2. All right, let's move on here to a number 1. Are we all on the same number 1?
No.
Mine's not. No.
Okay.
No,
cool.
I have a higher at 3 that is Aaron's number 1, and I think that you and I share a number 1, Evan.
Oh, I see. Okay, fair enough. Because I do have a same number 1. Therefore, let's get to the unique one, which is Aaron. What is your number 1?
Oh boy. So again, this is a card I've talked about a lot. I tried really, really hard not to put this one on my list, but there weren't too many good cards to pick, let's be honest, from this block. And also I just couldn't deny the impact that this card had in terms of, the way that it made Eldrazi aggro a player, the way that it gave Eldrazi a new form of attack in terms of, there's disruption and there's aggression. And in my opinion, the best aggro decks are the ones that can do both, where, they can pressure you with damage and they can also disrupt your hand. And, you don't normally want to commit too much to the board because you'll just lose it all with a removal spell or a board wipe. But, with this card, you really don't even have to worry about that. And this also gave the Eldrazi deck some play against combo decks, where normally your strategy would just be kill them before they get there. Well, now you don't even have to worry about that. And on a really, frightening body as well, my number 1 is just going to be Thought-Knot Seer. So Thought-Knot Seer is 4 colorless and a Wingding. 3 colorless and a Wingding for a creature Eldrazi with 4 power and 4 toughness. When it enters the battlefield, target opponent reveals their hand and you choose a non-land card from it and exile that card. And then when Thought-Knot Seer leaves the battlefield, target opponent draws a card. So a 4/4, you normally see this on like a Brain Maggot. You normally see this on a Kite Sail Freebooter, something with 1 toughness or 2 toughness that's reasonably easy to kill, because you're going to get that card back. Well, first off, you're not going to, because that card is gone. It is exiled, and this is 4/4. Like, this can just kill you. With Eye of Ugin and with the Temples, it was not unusual to see this on turn 2. A 4/4 on turn 2 that just yanks any card from your hand is terrifying. You could also get into shenanigans with Eldrazi Displacer to where you can blink this. And so, you have the wild art of the eye just kind of looking at you in the middle of the torso, what appears to be the torso. But yeah, this card is terrifying, and it gave Eldrazi that perfect combination of, big creatures, 4/4s, 5/5s, the Eldrazi Mimics, and also disruption of, nice board wipe, idiot. You're just never going to cast it. You have the kind of reflection ability on the Reality Smasher. You have this, and, between those 2 cards, that's the reason why Eldrazi continues to be a player in no less than 3 formats.
I mean, we had it in our top 10 most important cards of the modern era. Top 10 Eldrazi, top 10 Svetlin Velinov, top 10 cards of the decade.
Yeah.
This thing has a pedigree.
Yep. This thing was my number 3 as well. I mean, you wanted this on your turn 2 in that Eldrazi deck between Eye of Ugin and Eldrazi Temple, or other if you're playing Simian Spirit Guide or some others in the Bant Eldrazi deck, you had like Birds of Paradise kind of effects. This thing is absurd. This thing is 4/4 for. We've come a long way since Daralore, folks. 4/4s for 4 used to have drawbacks, not positive abilities. Again, super easy to cast. Making a colorless is not difficult. This thing is terrifying. I mean, any game that goes Thought-Knot Seer into Reality Smasher, even if it's on turns 4 and 5, that's a tough game for your opponent to win.
Yep.
It truly is. And this card, I mean, I actively kept it off my list. This is absolutely one of the all-stars of the block. We've talked about it quite a bit. But, just the
it's
raw
hard to
efficiency.
deny. Yeah.
The raw efficiency is unbelievable. Like, it's hard to say that when they make more cards that are 4 mana 4/4s or X mana for X power and toughness that do something awesome, you can't say, well, Thought-Knot Seer was there first, being awesome. Yep. So let's move on here to our number 1. And this, to me, is the poster child. It's the poster child for when you just push too hard. You You make the best thing so clearly the best thing that you smack it onto people's forehead and you're like, this is the best thing you're going to be doing for the next 2 years. Get used to it. It's happening. Live with it, because there was nothing more efficient. There was nothing more powerful. There was nothing better you could curve into. There was nothing that defined the metagame more than what, Ruben?
Than Gideon, Ally of Zendikar.
Ugh.
Gideon, Ally of Zendikar, originally from Battle for Zendikar. Legendary Planeswalker Gideon for 2 generic mana, white, 4 total mana. Entered the battlefield with 4 loyalty. +1 until end of turn, Gideon, Ally of Zendikar, becomes a 5/5 human soldier ally creature with indestructible, that's still a Planeswalker, prevent all damage that would be dealt to him this turn. 0: create a 2/2 white knight ally creature token, and -4, you get an emblem with creatures you control get +1/+1. I mean, it is a factory for making 2/2s, so every turn you make a 2/2 without any need for any additional input. +1, you can put pressure on opposing planeswalkers. You can make a creature on after a board wipe and get in there for 5 damage. And oh, by the way, creatures you control get +1/+1 forever. The turn that you play it, if you want to, which was a very popular play, particularly against things like Dragonlord Silumgar, so that your opponents couldn't just steal your Gideon. You just play Gideon, make an emblem, and attack with your 1/1s or whatever. This card was all over the place. It won 2 different Pro Tours in Abzan and in Selesnya tokens. It saw play in Mardu vehicles. It saw play in Dwarves. It saw play in Orzhov control. It saw play in black-white or in red-white control. It saw play everywhere, and even started seeing play in like sideboards in Legacy, just as a way to have a Miracles Mirror Breaker. This card's absurd. It saw play everywhere, and it was way too pushed.
Yeah, this card was good in every sort of deck you could think of. Sees a bit of modern, I think even Legacy play as well. I've seen this show up in sideboards sometimes where it's like, are you serious? My favorite thing, when I think of Gideon, I will always think of the fact that one of the best things you could be doing in Standard at the time was you'd play Dragonlord Silumgar, and you would just steal it, and then you would immediately glow the emblem so that you could kill it. That was always just hilarious. It always just definitely was something to have on your bucket list of what are some things you want to do before you die? Steal a Gideon and kill it.
There has, and feel free to correct me if I am wrong, because I'm literally looking. There has never been a Planeswalker that has made a 2 power, 2 toughness token for free. That sometimes it's a +1 if it's 5+ mana on Garruk. Sometimes you get 3/1/1s if it's a 6 mana Elspeth. You can turn creatures into an 0/2. You get Liliana gives them -2, -1. But never was it just, here is a free, no minus. No plus even, but whatever. But no minus to make a 2/2 that would block it from then on out. This is the best guarded Planeswalker basically ever made. It was ridiculous. It was great in multiples. You loved seeing 2 of this in your hand. Yep. Go make a token. My turn. Make a token. Play another one, or or pop it for the ultimate. Play another one. Make another token. It was just nuts. There was no downside whatsoever. It was the best thing you could be doing. It was just. It was ridiculous. And never have I ever seen a Planeswalker that wasn't just straight busted in half run a format like Gideon.
Certainly at 4 mana. Yeah. I mean, we've got Liliana Dreadhorde General. We've got a couple of Nissas that turn your lands into 3/3s or 2/2s. But never a 4 mana make a 2/2 every turn. The value attached to Gideon is unparalleled. It is the Jace Chandra equivalent, Jace,
the Mind Sculptor, right?
The Mind Sculptor, right. Chandra, Torch of Defiance, Gideon, Ally of Zendikar.
Those are the best
They're
ever
the
made.
Same conversation.
And it was so good and so ridiculous. And this is one of those cards, they showed us the day one, the big PAX reveal. They were like, here is Gideon. And we're like, wow, if this is where we're starting, right? Well, no, that's where you started and ended for the format from that day forward. Yeah. Hoo boy. All right. And so that was our top 10, BFZ and OGW cards. You'll see them on the screen right now. For your review, take a look at my list, Aaron's list, Ruben's top 10. And we want to hear from you about what card we did not talk about. And we'll select our favorite to win a $50 gift certificate to CoolStuffInc.com. But before we go, I want to thank my co-host. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Ruben.
Thank you.
And I'll move here to our final slide. Let's see here. I want to thank our sponsor, CoolStuffing.com, our co-sponsors, CardHoarder.com, UltraSleeves.com, and CubaMagigs, my co-hosts, Aaron Campbell and Ruben Bressler. You guys for watching and listening, and hope you support us at Patreon.com/MagicMikes. Follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe to everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online at Twitch.tv at Magic Mikes, on Twitter at Magic Mikes Cast, our Magic Mikes subreddit, and like the Magic Mikes page on Facebook. Or join us here next week, same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mikes. Good night, everybody.